that, oh yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay, good. That I grew up, as many of you did, or even those of you who have emigrated from Ireland, understand Ireland and Irish America. We balance the two in our heads and we go seamlessly between the two, but we are also aware of differences in how of perceptions. So when you're in Ireland, what's Irish means one thing, and when you're in the United States, Irish means something else. And if you're an American, it means a third thing. And if you're, you know, your perspective is informed by the time in which you are engaging with Irish, and where you're engaging with Irish, and it has changed over time. And I suppose I found myself thinking about, like, we can use the parade as an example. If you are marching on Fifth Avenue, your experience of being Irish on March 17th is entirely different than those who are watching on the sidelines, or who are not even on the sidelines, who are in some pub drowning pints of Guinness or something. It's a very, very different experience. And I found myself trying to figure out how we got there, how to explain all the merchandising that goes on around St. Patrick's Day, and the intersection of Ireland and the United States over the course of the 19th and 20th centuries and 21st centuries. Yeah.
So you've come up with this, you've created this phrase called the green space. How would you define that, and how do you use it over the course of this book?
Well, if I asked anyone on the Zoom to do a word association, if I said Irish, what do you say? Now, when I do that with my students, that comes back green or St. Patrick, or sometimes Guinness, sometimes what's that ultimate boxing fighter guy?
Fighting, yeah.
Yeah, he comes up. Never a golfer, always the fighter comes up. Sometimes they'll say The Departed, you know, they'll think of a current movie. But it's all over the map. But it tends to, so where do all these things reside, right? They're in our heads, but they've been in generations of heads, and every generation has contributed a new code, if you will, into this space. I just called it the green space, which is like a grab bag, or like Santa's backpack, you know, or a virtual storage unit, and everybody can put their hand in and take out whatever they want and adapt it. In the old days, people would stop you. They would complain if there was something objectionable they didn't like. But it is much harder to stop certain images. It was easier to stop images, we'll say, 100 years ago than it is today.
Why do you think that is? Can you give an example?
Sure. You know, this, for example, in, let's say, the early 20th century, the peasant, the peasant was seen as stigmatizing the Irish as being unfit for self-government, poor, ignorant, etc. And the depiction of the peasant was actively opposed on the stage, on screen, on anything that was perceived as demeaning, right? But yet today, we have people lining the St. Patrick's Day parade wearing basically a modern iteration of the despised peasant, but that's the red beards and the green hats. So that's what I mean, that it has been so extensively commercialized and universally adopted. And we can point, I don't want to point fingers at certain things, but there's at in the mid 20th century, there's something that accelerated that and made it more acceptable. And therefore, it's really hard. We could try to mount a campaign to get rid of the red whiskers. We could, but I don't think we would win.
So when you say challenges were mounted, who were behind these challenges? Was it a group effort? Was it individual groups? What, what was going on?
Well, it depended on, there were many people with vested interests in it. So there were second and third generation Irish Americans who were assimilating and acculturating. They were not mired in poverty. They were middle class, even wealthy Irish who wanted to be seen as Americans and as contributing to the United States of America, that being Irish was a positive thing. We had been there, they would argue we were there when the United States was founded. We made contributions during the colonial period. Ireland had a heroic age back before British colonization, all that type of stuff. That's kind of the rhetoric that they used. Irish immigrants who come in the 1920s and the 1950s, they have a different, they come out of a newly independent Ireland, and their interest is in buttressing what Ireland wants. So official Ireland and respectability is a big thing here. And then you have those who just see Irish as a way to make money.
Within Ireland or outside the Irish community? Within the Irish community?
Initially outside the Irish community in the 21st century. Well, some quality Irish products are now part of multinational conglomerates. So it's not Ireland itself, it's global. But for example, the Irish tourist industry is concerned with image.
Well, I'll just push back a little bit. Like the Irish tourists, sometimes it seems like it's its own worst enemy, because the ads that they generate, well, maybe not so much now, but say in the 80s and 90s, was about come back to Ireland, beautiful Colleen's and the rural landscape, escape from the city life, and so that lures Irish Americans either on a roots trip or just non-Irish as going over there as part of an escape, a relaxing vacation. But then, maybe some of the Irish people are a little upset when Americans go over there and want to see the donkey cart and the Colleen,
the leprechauns,
the thatched roof and all the rest of it. So how do they not justify it, but how do they live with that tension?
They several decades ago, maybe 60, 70 years ago, they adopted the language that America had been using. So instead of what happened?
The tourist board.
Yeah, the tourist board was early in perceiving that they could not change an image that had a century of longevity in the United States. So instead of fighting to convince America that the harp is the symbol of Ireland, which it is officially, they stuck with the shamrock because it had a century of recognition behind it. So they just got on board with it and never took it off the tail of the Aer Lingus planes, just went with it. The same there. It's the way Ireland is being marketed now in the 21st century is much more American, I would argue, than it was in the second half of the 20th century. They were still trying to, steer tourists towards the west of Ireland, what was deemed as more authentic, places where the language was alive, where you had an older, slower way of life. Now they tend to want you to go to Dublin and a more urban experience, or a cultural experiences like Titanic in Belfast, or the Wexford Opera Festival, or the Galway Film Festival, that type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would guess at some point the Development Authority or the IDA, whatever, I'm not sure what the name of it is now, must have got involved because they wanted to attract business. So it had to be perceived as a modern country, but also have all these other quality of life benefits to attract business or relocators.
Yeah, one of the hardest things for the tourism business was to upgrade accommodations to make sure that there was heating and electricity and running water and enough hotel rooms, and improving roads so people could get beyond Killarney and Blarney. Yeah. Yeah, there's a tension between these. First of all, the tourist industry in Ireland really objected for a long time. The government objected to tourism as a driver of the economy because they thought it would make the Irish appear subservient. And that's not what they wanted. They wanted to be seen as a modern European nation, even though they were lagging beyond all of the rest of Western Europe through the 50s and 60s, as you know, Linda. So, but the Marshall Plan really nudged Ireland, or gave it a big push and said, no, tourism is where you need to go. And so that's early. That's the just right after the Second World War, sorry. So in other words, they're ahead of, at that time, the model. They brought people from Ireland to the United States to study the American hotels and American tourism. And so that goes into Ireland much earlier than, and so they're speaking an American language. So when Americans arrive in Ireland, they get what they expect, right?
I mean, I felt this as I read the book and just listening to you talk, is that there are several groups trying to wrest control of the image. There's the Irish in America, there's American Irish, there's Ireland. Do those groups, are they constant over time? Do they change, or what? Like, is there always these? Who are the main drivers of the identity, controlling identity?
The main drivers.
Or does it change? I mean, what does
there
it
are
change?
there are so many hands in the green space at the moment. So, but I will give you an example, Linda. There was Irish America had for about a good 100 years, we'll say, for a good century, from maybe 1810 to 1910. They were the only ones really working on how to present Irish, how to explain Irish to Americans, be it politically, culturally, or in media, in material culture, in imports, for example. We'll talk about that later. But then once Ireland gets independence in late 1921 and starts in 22, now you have a competing. Now, Irish from Ireland and Irish in America now have two competing visions. One is from the Gaelic Revival, even though we've had the Gaelic Revival in the United States, but one kind of rejects the idea of putting up a statue of Commodore Barry, for example, as being old-fashioned, and they prefer to have something like the feis, the United Irish Counties feis, so traditional culture, right? I'm not sure I'm answering correctly.
Yeah, no, I guess maybe there's not a question there. I'm just struck by the number of people that want to shape the identity. Why is it so important to these different groups that they have control of what the definition of Irish is in America?
Some of it is to validate Ireland's right to self-governance. That's one big angle of it. Another is to
So that would be the beginning of the 20th century.
And the other comes from the 19th century too, is a counter to nativist images that portrayed the Irish in a negative light. And the way to do that was to say, we are Irish, but we are also American, right? And that those two things are not incompatible. So patriotism, respectability, patriotism, self-governance, excuse me. So those are sort of one aspect of vested interest. And then you have those people who are not Irish at all, who just say, oh, wow, the March holiday is on the 17th. You know, Italians have St. Joseph on the 19th. St. Joseph was never displaced. I mean, St. Patrick was never displaced by St. Joseph's because he existed as the March holiday long before Italian migrants come in. So it's already commercialized by the end of the 19th century, and people see that selling green carnations or postcards or green snakes or paper mache pigs, you know, anything will do, it'll make a buck.
Mhm.
I'm cynical on that part of it.
Okay, so part of it is the commercialization of the image.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Well,
You can see it a little bit happening with Cinco de Mayo. You can see the way that's getting commercialized. Yeah.
So let's go back. There's the American Irish Historical Society. It's been in the news lately because of its new leadership and the prospective sale of the house. But they were one of the first major organizations to try and to cement the Irish image as this sort of form of patriotism, contribution. We have every right to be here. We're fully invested citizens.
Mhm.
Would you agree? And was that the part of the reason was like political, but also to help the Irish who were already here make a place for themselves in the community, in the larger society, American society?
Well, again, we have different vested interests. So
Okay.
making a place for Irish immigrants really falls under the umbrella of the United Irish Counties Association,
Okay.
which is the umbrella from 1904. The American Irish Historical Society is founded just slightly before that, at the end of the 19th century. But you also have the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick that go back to the 1783. So the Historical Society and the Friendly Sons, their audience for what they were doing was to convince America, broadly defined and at the highest levels, Congress, presidents, that, you know, you need to know what we did so that you can accept us. And the United Irish Counties operated similarly, but sort of at a under the radar, if you will. They were not as visible in what they were doing as the American Irish. I mean, the American Irish Historical Society made sure that their pamphlets got on the desk of the president. United Irish Counties was working at a different level. They made sure they were visible on St. Patrick's Day in New York with dignity, and they made sure that the feis was a vehicle for transmitting Irish culture to the next generation, right? They all became citizens too, but it's just different arguments, different agendas in a way, but all having to do with image.
And those groups, well, I know United Irish County Association, AIHS, are still active today. Has their agenda changed? Is it pretty much the same, or how does it adapt over time?
I would say the United Irish Counties is still succeeding in its mission. It has its challenges, but that they are passing on the traditions of Irish culture, Irish heritage, be it music, dance, language. The American Irish Historical Society, they're not any way pursuing the same agenda that was pursued by the founders.
I mean, I guess they
I,
don't really have to. It's the,
uh,
no?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, because in sense, well, I guess the way to answer that, Linda, is to say that since the 1960s, now we have Irish studies programs at major universities, and that has kind of taken over what the American Irish Historical Society was trying to do in
Mhm,
1900,
mhm.
right?
Or groups like ours,
Yeah,
getting the word out about what goes on within the community.
yeah.
Um, okay, well, let's sort of bring it out. There are places that you discuss where the green space is really visible to a broader audience. It was really we talked about the St. Patrick's Day parade, but also the Two Worlds Fair in the 20th century, in the third, so 39 and 40 and 64 and 65. These were really places where the Irish had exhibits that were attended by millions of people, arguably millions of people. What can you talk about? What was the emphasis in each of those, and what was successful about either of them in terms of elevating or maintaining or creating an image of the Irish for the broader public?
Well, those two fairs were different. Ireland had a presence in Chicago in
Mm,
1893 and in St. Louis in 1904, but Ireland was still part of the British Empire. So those Irish exhibits were um, privately managed by Irish Americans. And so they presented Ireland in a certain way, an Irish village. So when the Irish government decided to have the World's Fair, a presence at the World's Fair as an independent nation in 33 and in 64, they tried to negotiate. They had to have some things that would be familiar to draw an audience in. So for example, the 39 building is called the Shamrock Pavilion, and it's built in the shape of a shamrock. But inside the artwork, I have a few slides I can show later. Inside the artwork is a gigantic mural on the electrification of the Shannon River, the Ardnacrusha facility. Um, that's how they tried to do it. They put modern Ireland within the shape that Irish America would know, even though the Shamrock Pavilion is also quite modern architecture. It's steel and glass for 1939. It's very innovative.
And these are both in New York, the
Both
39
in New York, yeah.
and 63.
Flushing Meadows. And then there's the 64 World's Fair was a modern riff on the older ones that in Chicago. I have some slides I can show you, but the main thing is in both of those, they're considered trade pavilions. Ireland is trying to show Americans the products, what Ireland can manufacture. And what I will say is by 39 and 64 are absolutely no different in what they're showing than that Americans saw in 04 and 1893. In other words, woolen goods, China, what else? Blackthorn walking sticks, bog oak carvings, all that type of stuff is the same. There is one difference in 64. We get the introduction of Irish coffee. The Irish coffee bar comes in.
Weren't some of our members involved in that? Was it, or no?
Rosalie Fitzgibbon.
Yeah, for the pouring
Yeah.
you have a picture of her pouring the Irish
Yeah.
coffee.
I don't know, maybe Linda, this is a good point to run through some slides just to underscore what we've been saying, if that's okay.
Yep.
Can I share my screen?
Yeah, let me see.
Did you say under share screen?
Yeah.
Someone else, I'll see if I can.
Oh no, can you do it? Let me.
No, you have disabled participant screen sharing.
What do I have to, just tell me what to do under share?
On share screen, if you click the option to share, allow the participant.
Let me see. Screens, documents, layouts. I don't know. Yes, allow. No, did that work?
No,
Okay.
Okay, well,
Let me see if I can do one more thing. Host tools. Um,
usually on share
Share
screen, if you click on share screen, Linda, usually it gives you options.
yeah, I'm looking. Okay, share. Just says open system settings, cancel. No, I can't get it. Can you,
Could email it to.
okay.
Okay. Hold on, everybody, just have patience. It's worth it. It'll be worth it.
Share notes, share screen.
Let me just go here. Okay.
Let me see if I can.
It's okay. It's coming in, Linda. Now it's just loading as a Google Drive link. Hold on. Okay. You only
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. You do not need to open, Linda, you don't need to open the audio files, just the PowerPoint. It should go fine. I sent it to your email. Oh yeah. I'm viewing John Garvey's screen.
I clicked share screen just to see what would happen, and
Okay, so we're looking at your screen now, Anne.
I am. Oh, what do I do to undo this and go back to?
You just click share screen again and opt out, I think.
Well, let me see if I can. I'm trying to get back to my
The other thing is you can make me a host.
I'll do that. Host. I just made you the host.
You did? Okay, and you have to get off the screen here, though.
You want me to get off? Okay.
No, not you, Anne Garvey has to get off.
Yeah, how do I do that? I just see Zoom and I see myself and Linda and
Up at the top, it should say view options.
no, it doesn't.
Click at the bottom, share screen.
You are screen sharing, it says.
Yeah, say stop.
Maybe I'll go to stop share.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So now I can, you think?
Try it. Yeah, I just made you host. I'll get off the pin.
Yeah, okay, here it is.
Oh, there we go. Great.
Okay. All right. Okay, thanks for your patience, everybody. So I just, a lot of this will just underscore, but I'll help maybe prompt some questions. So Linda asked me how what inspired the book. And some of it is this contrast. On the left from 1843, where it says neither Irish nor Catholic need apply. And then Life magazine, the cover of Life magazine in 1961, in which, you know, she's basically an all-American girl. Now the red hair.
An Irish girl.
Yeah, Maureen. Well, except for the red hair, she could be any American girl, right? But because they use the word Irish in America and she's a redhead, and this is post The Quiet Man, of course, we know, and she's wearing a green sweater, right? So,
and they're wool sweaters, the
yeah,
tweed skirt. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So in between that is what I chose for the cover of the book, which is Uncle Sam embracing Hibernia. Now, that's 1910. That's the epitome of when I would say the all the efforts that had been made up till then were succeeding. And what complicates it after 1910, 11 is the creation of the Irish Free State and subsequently ERA and then the Republic of Ireland. So my table of contents are there on the right. We talked a little bit about what I call vested interest, but what Linda was talking about, competing groups who had agendas or and were interested in the image. Chapter 2 is on how media, radio, television, magazines, newspapers especially, covered the Irish and how it changed over time. Cultural currency is, and that's generally tends to be negative, especially because Ireland stays neutral during the Second World War, and a lot of journalism on Ireland is informed by British attitudes because their correspondents are based in London. Cultural currency is how they responded back to that. What methods did they use? And I'll touch on that in a minute. But things like erecting statues, it's a big thing at the turn of the 20th century. In other words, putting an Irish presence in the public square. Racial reckoning is about the 1920s when the first restrictions on Irish immigration come in, and the Irish object to being classified as inferior to Anglo-Saxons. Very heated debates in which the American Irish Historical Society were in the forefront of that argument. Selling value is how Americans got introduced to products that said Irish or conveyed Irish, and it's the difference between a quality niche market and a kitsch market, if you will. The Emerald Sheen is about St. Patrick's Day and the art, how that evolved over time, and Come Back to Erin is about tourism. Okay, this is in between No Irish Need Apply, that ad, and 1911, where Hibernia is embraced by Uncle Sam. This is what you have. This is how the Irish were being depicted. This is not a surprise to any of us. You know, the Simeonized feature, othering those who were different. So this is one of the images that had to be counted. And this is circulating in places where there's a political agenda that it wants to keep the Irish out of. They're afraid of them. They're the wrong religion. They are a traumatized refugee people, the famine population anyway, and people don't know what to do with them, right? And because they're white, they have the vote, and therefore potentially are an ethnic voting bloc. So this is the backlash to that. But then you get, this is coexisting at the same time. This is a genre of melodramas that were very, very popular in the 19th century, that conveyed Ireland basically set in 1798, and that fight to overthrow Britain that was crushed, the United Irish Rebellion. Most of the melodramas are about that, so that there's always an English villain and there's a lovable Irish heroine. But also you have Thomas More's melodies that are circulating in the 19th century, from early in the 19th century, that portray a very benign image of Ireland. So there's music floating around that has nothing to do with the Bridget McBruiser image. So we have two images, or at least three images at that time. We can talk more about this in Q&A. This is in 1879, it was the centenary of Thomas More's birth. And this was seized upon by Irish America as an occasion to counter any negativity. They raised up Moore, whose music had been sung for the last 70 years in the United States, by Irish and non-Irish in high art circles, in concerts, and also in homes with pianos. And you can see here, the middle image is of the statue erected in Prospect Park by the St. Patrick's Society of the City of Brooklyn in 1879. The Friendly Sons of St. Patrick put one up in Central Park the following year. And you can see that image on the right, which is in the book, that's the location where the United Irish Counties annually basically had a PR event. They to promote the fesh. So the fesh was always in June, and this would always attract a crowd to stop and say, "A fesh, what is a fesh?" And they got to see Irish on display in a public space in New York. Okay, and this is the fesh, the program, always on the grounds of one of the universities, Fordham for a long time. And this on the left is a medal for singing that Rita Fitzpatrick won. Rita McLaughlin, she was when she won it. And this is how the fesh was promoted in, in just after the Second World War. This is a subway poster that was, so people encountered Irish this way. People who knew nothing about Irish would say, "Oh, literature, dancing, sports, music, the pipes are calling," right? A festival of Celtic culture. This is how Irish was being portrayed to New Yorkers in the mid-20th century. And behind that is the United Irish Counties Association that I mentioned earlier. So from 1904, they were organizing not only the fesh, but well, the fesh comes a little later, the 30s, but they were organizing all the events of the county associations. And on the right, you can see a ball from 1942. So if I didn't tell you this was an Irish crowd, there is no way for you to know. But what you would say is, "Oh, there are servicemen in that picture. That's patriotism. They are dressed elegantly. That is self-respect. People look pretty happy. They don't look like Bridget McBruiser," right? So images.
It's a large crowd.
Very large crowd, always in a major ballroom. That's the Commodore Hotel. And then New Yorkers would see Ireland on display, or Irish on display, in also a very dignified manner on Fifth Avenue. Look at the dress code this is around 1963. It's morning suits, top hats. That young man is Manus Gallagher. He was only like 2 years in the country, and he's leading the Donegal up Fifth Avenue, and they're looking right towards the cathedral and the cardinal here. Again, this is considered the New York Parade, and John Ridge is the expert on this, really, but the New York Parade is looked down upon as like staid and old-fashioned and not fun. But in fact, there's a reason why it is the way it is, and it all has to do with image, combating image. Okay, I wanted to play 2 things about the parade. So this is the image, right? And then how does American popular culture interpret the parade? So there's 2 short excerpts from the Fred Allen show. Fred Allen was a weekly broadcast, and 20 million American households across, or 20 million American listeners, I should say, 3 out of every 4 radio households heard him every week. So these 2 clips are about the parade. Hopefully the first one is going to work.
Thank you and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you, Mr. Wallington, for that botanical send-off. Ah, Jimmy, don't you enjoy spring here in New York? The birds, the trees, green things shooting up.
Green thing? Name me one green thing you've seen in New York.
Well, did you see the St. Patrick's Day parade last Wednesday? Why, that was greener than a grapevine and twice as long, Jimmy.
That's right, that was some parade. You know, I couldn't get across Fifth Avenue for 6 hours.
Well, you should have done what I did, Jimmy.
Well, how did you get across Fifth Avenue?
Well, I joined the Ancient Order of Hibernians, marched 4 blocks in the parade at an angle, and then stepped out on the other side of the street.
Say, how come every March 17th they let 50,000 Irishmen stop traffic and parade down Fifth Avenue?
Do you know anyone who can stop 50,000 Irishmen from doing it?
Okay. That's that one. And then he does it pretty regularly. The one that I don't have an audio copy of is from 48 when De Valera had a ticker tape parade in New York. So this is just the parade is not the only Irish content, in other words, that Fred Allen used. But listen for what I would call the codes that go into the green space, right? Green, marching, 50,000 Irishmen, you can't stop them, etc. And now we have a different version here in 49. Oh, and I should say, Ireland becomes a republic in 48. So there's a slight difference in presentation too.
Walking down Main Street is like a man with one tooth trying to eat an ear of corn. It's a lot of effort, but you don't get much out of it.
You haven't found out much about travel, have you?
No, I haven't. I'll try one more character. This little man gimping along with the agonized expression. Hi, bud. Ajax Saturday.
Oh, let me lean on you, boy. Me feet are killing me.
Your feet?
Every step I take, it feels as though my shoes are full of eyeballs and I'm treading on them one at a time.
What's wrong with your feet?
I marched in the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Oh, say, how was the parade, Ajax?
Oh, for the sight I long remember.
Impressive, eh?
The men of Sligo with their pea green silk hats.
Yes,
The Irish National Guard with their kilts billowing in the wind.
yes.
The Department of Sanitation band playing Clancy Lowered the Broom. Good. Led the Sons of Galway past 34th Street. A puny individual in front of an English chop house yelled 3 cheers for Sir Cedric Hardwick.
3 cheers for Sir Cedric Hardwick. What happened?
In 2 minutes flat, the English chop house was a parking space.
Tell me, Ajax, do you think the Irish like to travel?
Sure, me boy. Travel was invented by an Irishman.
What Irishman invented travel?
Fitzpatrick.
Oh, Fitzpatrick.
Haven't you seen Fitzpatrick's travelogues?
Oh, yeah.
Up the Columbia River with rod and reel, through Turkey with knife and fork.
Yes, Do you ever travel, Ajax?
Not me, me boy. Only one man in the Cassidy family ever traveled, and it cured us for 2 generations.
What happened?
My father traveled to Sing Sing.
Sing Sing.
Wasn't bad enough my poor father was leaving for 10 years.
Yes.
He got seasick going up the river.
Okay. Let me just stop sharing for a second and just to say, you know, when you talk about the green space, how do 20 million listeners get the jokes? It's because they're already in the green space. So for example, yeah, popular culture is one element, what people are reading in the newspapers, and it contributes other elements. This idea of Fitzpatrick's travelogues, I don't know if any of you have ever seen them. Some of them are up on YouTube. These introduced Americans to Ireland. James Fitzpatrick went around Ireland and said, you know, here's the Blarney Stone and you can kiss it, and here's Galway, and you know, and they were played before the main movie, sort of like the coming attractions. Fitzpatrick's travelogues were seen in theaters all across the United States. That's one way that Americans became familiar with a concept of Ireland as a tourist destination. The other thing that was mentioned there in that last one was it's a play on that the sanitation department was playing Clancy Lowered the Broom, but that's a reference to Dennis Day's 1949 hit Clancy Lowered the Boom, which was on an album called Shamrocks and Shillelagh. So you can see the way there's a lot of cross-fertilization going into this. And mentioning Cedric Hardwick, he's an English actor in Hollywood. In 1949, he was on screens, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. But the fact of the matter is, English versus Irish and that hostility, that's already established. And so that's why, calling out an English actor's name leads to the demolition of a chop house and a parking lot in its place. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization, I guess is what I wanted to say there. Linda, I'll stop here for a minute. I do have a few more slides, but I'll see if there's anything you wanted to pick up on there or where you want to go.
No, I guess with the the United Irish Counties Association, I guess it's really more just some of the if you have these slides, the discussion about the the Irish image and then the image of quality, in terms of some of the products. You talked about the textiles, the wool, the league,
Lace and linen were really big things too.
yeah.
And
And
if you go to Ireland today, linen tea towels are still for sale. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that juxtaposition between, the Irish image as fighters, as drinkers, but then this high quality product image that they endorse oftentimes through the World's Fair. Those were areas, even in Chicago and St. Louis, to promote Irish goods. So there's always this tension between the people and then some of the things that are Irish, that are high quality, but Irish that are also troublesome. And they exist side by side.
They exist side by side. And if you're go to Shannon Airport, they have top shelf Jameson whiskey, which is an old export from Ireland, always an expensive export item, right next to Shamrock boxer shorts,
Or Kiss Me, I'm Irish, or
yeah. And people in 1900, 1910, they would have been flummoxed by this juxtaposition. This is not what they had in mind at all.
Yeah. And even the I don't know what the right word is, commodification of the St. Patrick's Day parade in Dublin based on American traditions and American ways of celebrating the day for the Irish and non-Irish, using the green hats and beards, and you have that picture of the group of young Irish people at the parade of all different ethnic backgrounds, but dressed in the
the leprechaun suit. Yeah.
Leprechaun suit. So it seems to be moving back and forth across the Atlantic, the different imagery.
I'll share my screen again if you don't mind, and I'll run through
Go ahead.
I think it will go to your point there. Okay. No. Oh yeah. So Fred Allen on the parade, his audience would have been familiar with this type of postcard. John Ridge will know these. Again, the simian features on the Irishmen who are parading, even though the Irish Brigade is one of they lead the parade with and they were very much responsible for a positive American patriotic image for the Irish. This is being undercut by the postcards, and you can see also this is 1905. You have rye whiskey here, all the symbols that are in the green space: shamrocks, drinking, harp, etc., and marching. So you can do anything once you know what the elements are. People put them together and they make they sell postcards or something. The other thing that happened with St. Patrick's Day, which is why 20 million Americans could understand what Fred Allen was talking about, is that there's a body of children's literature specifically to teach them about St. Patrick's Day. Most of it is totally made up. Like, what do you serve for St. Patrick's Day? Well, pickles are green, asparagus is green, so serve that. But also teaching about perpetuating the myths about St. Patrick and snakes, and then taking it to extraordinary limits in plays in children's classrooms. And as you can see here, freezing Ireland in time, no, this is 1932. The man is wearing 18th century garb. The woman is wearing something that no Irish woman ever wore in Ireland, but, you know, possibly influenced by, I don't know, Scarlett O'Hara's dress in the barbecue scene in Gone with the Wind. But Marie Irish is a pseudonym for Evelyn Fitzsimons. She wrote a whole load of these books, and they permeate classrooms all across the United States, and it's how Americans learned about the holiday. Now, in Ireland, St. Patrick's Day is not really an official holiday till early 20th century, and then it's a very much a religious holiday. Businesses are closed, including pubs, so it's not at all like what's happening in the United States. And the Depression and the Second World War allow this vacuum to open up that enables this to become what Americans think of as Irish, right? And then Ireland comes along after the war and says, no, wait a minute, that's all wrong, but it's too late by that stage. This is the pavilion we were talking about earlier. This is the Shamrock Pavilion in 39 on the left, with a map of Ireland in the reflecting pool, a female allegorical statue of Ireland, Mother Ireland, on the end of it. And in the interior, the right-hand mural is by Sean Keating. It's on Ardna Crusher, the power plant that harnessed the Shannon River for electricity. You can see on the lower left, another painting by Sean Keating, which is called the Tipperary Hurler, that toured the United States in the 1920s. So you have Gaelic Ireland, the hurler, you know, a strong, independent representative of Gaelic Ireland, versus the modern image. Ireland really had to balance those two, because the Tipperary hurler was very popular when it toured in the 1920s, and Gaelic athletic sports were extremely popular among immigrants and the second generation. So the big mural is for actually much more political purposes, whereas the smaller images are for the diaspora, if you will. This is the 63, 64, oh, sorry, it should be 64, 65, forgive me. This is Ireland stamps. And you can see here the pavilion. The main thing I would point out is that the centerpiece is a reminiscent of a round tower, or always at the other World's Fair, you had a reproduction of a castle, Blarney Castle or something. And this is just a modern iteration of that. But the main thing at the fair that comes out of the fair that's new, if you will, is Irish coffee. This is Rosaline pouring the cream on the Irish coffee. The store, and then she went on, after the success of Irish coffee at the World's Fair, she went to open the Irish Pavilion on, I think it was East 57th Street, in which she showcased some of the same handmade Irish goods that were displayed at the World's Fair. And also there was a restaurant with a coffee bar as well. So Irish coffee is a new addition to the green space, and the purpose behind it really was to reintroduce Americans to Irish whiskey, which had fallen out of favor because of prohibition and also the Second World War, and the American market got flooded by Scotch. And so Americans needed to be reintroduced to this. Guinness had the same problem, but the taste for Guinness, Americans had lost the taste for Guinness by the 1940s, 1950s, but Irish coffee looks like Guinness. So there's a familiarity with it. There's an eye appeal, you know, which was what they were going for, but it really was to reintroduce a top shelf export to the American market. And this is what I think you were mentioning, Linda. Yeah. This is a Balik butter dish, stamped on the bottom, not only with the potter's mark, but the mark on the right, which is the Irish trademark that's used from 1906. So this is another high-end Irish export. known in the United States through the 19th century, an enormous display in Chicago in 1893. This one in particular is made in the shape of a cottage. The thatched cottage, is one of those counterweights to the negative image. How can Ireland be a threat if it's just a land of, you know, the humble wee cottage, you know, even though it stayed neutral, you know, its people they're harmless, right? That's sort of the image. But for Irish immigrants, this is quite nostalgic because a lot of them would have been raised in a house like this. This is a butter dish, which has never been used because if you used it once, it would break. It's from 1965 and it's been in my mother's china cabinet ever since. And I just love it. But Balik is a Fermanagh pottery that with its roots in the 19th century, always expensive and always the people who purchased it in the 19th and early 20th century were non-Irish people, wealthy people who could afford Balik. After the Second World War, when this was purchased around 1965, the reason for purchasing Balik, and when Waterford is revived, the same, is to buy Irish and support the Irish economy. So there's two different motivations to own a piece of china like this. Yeah. Okay. Oh, then on tourism, I just wanted to point out the centrality.
Let's wrap this up so then we can open it up to some.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's the end. On tourism, you can see the cottage here again. Holiday Magazine is a large format, glossy magazine, the equivalent for the tourist market as Cosmopolitan is for fashion, and it is it did two features on Ireland very early on in 49 and 63. So again, the iconography it's kind of unchanging by this stage. And I think, we have to do Notre Dame. There you go. And then we can talk about it on the other side. And Notre Dame here. Here come the Irish. And this is the one you wanted me to show, Linda, right?
This is Ireland.
This is Ireland, 2014, I think it is. The St. Patrick's Day Festival in Dublin. Now, how this went across the Atlantic, I cannot, that is one of the reasons I wrote the book in some ways, try to figure out how we got to this point. Okay, I'll stop now.
Okay, can you just switch the hosting back to me? And, Marion, there was just so many ways we could go. We didn't even get into the politics or the 65 law or all, you know, the discussions related to all that, or to movies, The Quiet Man, all of the other, the Irish, I don't know what they call the Irish Mafia in the 1930s, that group of Irish actors. Now there's a whole nother crop of Irish actors that are very prominent in the United States. So it goes back and forth. Okay, would anybody like to pose any questions? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. John, I learned so much from you, and this book could not have been done without you. You're the greatest collector, and you're very generous at sharing things too. So thank you.
No, thank you. But I was wondering about my old friend Fred Allen.
Oh yeah.
I've listened over the years to many of the broadcasts, and he's kind of an oddball because he was the offspring of Irish parents, and he had a great understanding of Irish things, but it didn't stop him from lampooning them in the most horrible ways. But even the character that you played was Ajax Mulligan.
Yes. Ajax Cassidy, I think it is.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Cassidy. You know, these Irish names are all the same. But anyhow,
described as a bibulous old coot.
Yeah, but you know, and he was a very laughable person. But the guy that did the accent, if you listen to the accent, you know, this is quite a good accent. This is not a stage accent at all, but it's kind of accurate, and that's and at times the program, Fred Allen's program had very genuine Irish stuff, and it mixed it with very pejorative stuff about the Irish.
Mhm.
You take some of the other ethnic characters who were treated almost in a mollycoddling fashion as compared them to the Irish. But Fred didn't pull any stops out when he wanted to make fun of the Irish, which is a very interesting psychological thing to analyze.
Yes, one of the things that happens over the course of the, especially the evolution of St. Patrick's Day, is this the Irish being portrayed as the fun ethnic group, right?
Mhm.
That is crucial to the image. And so part of the old jokes from vaudeville in the 19th century resurface in radio with Fred Allen. And the Irish government in the 20th century really worries about their image on television. So when Ed Sullivan, also, you know, quite aware of his own Irish background, goes and does a special in Ireland, there is worry about where he'll go and what he'll do. You know, and he puts some new stuff in, and he does what Americans expect. He goes and kisses the Blarney Stone, for example.
But then he promotes Irish musicians like the Clancy Brothers or.
And the Clancy Brothers also, what do they do? Their signature trademark is the Aran sweater, which is, you know, about basically it's the garb of the Western peasant, which 50 years earlier, people at the American Irish Historical Society were working really hard to kill.
Really?
Yeah. That's why there was all the trouble over the Playboy of the Western World in 1911.
Well, and then fast forward to a couple of years ago in that movie Knives Out, where one of the characters wore an Irish sweater, and it created a huge surge in sales or popularity of the sweater. So it's funny how it goes back and forth.
Yeah, and also like the Banshees of Inisherin, you know, again, set in the west of Ireland, essentially just a modern Playboy of the Western World, where, you know, you have to, if you put yourself in the mindset of people who are advocating for self-governance and respectability and a positive image, things like that undercut it, right? Yeah. So yeah, Lady Gregory and Yeats came in and said, this is what Ireland is like. This is soberly documentary. And Irish America's like, no, we don't advocate for people killing their fathers and boasting of being heroes for that. That's not what we're about. There was war over it.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Anybody else?
Marion, what's going to happen in 25 years? Will there be any Irish community left in America?
Well, community is being defined differently, I suppose, John. It isn't going to be, you know, the big urban parishes like we knew growing up. It's a much more, I mean, because you can connect by Zoom. There are all sorts of ways that you can have online community. And I do think that culture and sports will drive it a lot more than political issues, I think.
I mean, like movies or dance or
yes, and the arts, dramas, yeah. I think that the New Irish Arts Center is is heralding the direction that community is going to go in, and that Irish is not going to be a very narrow definition. It's going to be much broader. You know, who can be Irish? Ireland just had Irish Multiracial Day last week.
right.
First
Well,
time. Yeah.
I was going to say it's Ireland looks different today than it did even 30 years ago.
Yeah, it looks more American, and I do think that the American influence is quite strong. And the only exception, I will say, I said this the other night, is Aer Lingus. Aer Lingus has stayed the course. You step on board that plane, you are introduced to Ireland in a very dignified manner. Yeah. Monica.
Marion, I am just blown away by your wealth of knowledge, which I know
All
it's
scattered all over the place
easier.
this morning.
No,
Sorry.
and it's absolutely wonderful. I have started your book, but it is a complicated situation, isn't it? I mean, it's hard to define, and one can feel that tension between immigrants, and I'm sure that applies to other ethnic groups. So it's almost like something that's evolving.
Mhm.
And as Linda pointed out, Ireland is a different country nowadays, and it's but you're addressing so many things that we all know, and you're expressing them as we wish we could. So
I wish Ireland is evolving. And for that reason, it makes me sad to think that on the parade route in Dublin, you have to have that stereotype. You know, there are so many other ways to be Irish that you don't have to go to that that costume.
Oh,
You have to wear
oh,
that costume.
yes, totally agree. This is just a little story, but there's a scholarship in Frank's name in TCU, and this year it's a very minor scholarship, has been awarded to a young Pakistani boy from Mayo, who was actually born in Mayo.
Mhm.
And I love that because Frank came here and he got a wonderful education in the United States. And even though this is minor, it's sort of passing on something that's very special.
Yeah, I remember Paul Dwyer telling a story about the daughter of an African-American superintendent somewhere in one of the northern Manhattan big apartment buildings that the Irish were in. And she saw the Irish little girls practicing for the fesh and she wanted to enter. And there was a little pushback, but Paul said, no, she can go in. She can.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anyhow, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
I was
Yes.
just going to comment on first, thank you, Marion. It's been excellent. But in talking about the people moving back and forth, the kids going back and forth to school, there's now a lot of American kids going and spending a semester abroad in Dublin that didn't happen even 20 years ago. And now there are really quite a number of them. And I wonder what impact that might have. I mean, when you spend 6 months in Ireland with Irish, my grandson just came out. Well, he did a first semester in Dublin at UCD, and he came back with, needless to say, he's heard a lot about the Irish at home, but he came back with a lot of really much stronger feelings about the Irish and what they are and what's, things he thought were superficial before, and then discovering that they're not quite so superficial. So that may have a positive impact
Yes,
on America too.
Yes, I agree. If you go to Ireland, you will experience Irish in a different way than if you never leave here. If your only experience is the month of March and everything being awash in green and every single newspaper headline starting with, the bars will be open, or something. The lead line is always the same. It's so predictable the way American journalism covers St. Patrick's Day. It's hardly ever innovative. But yes, visiting Ireland will open eyes. And Irish studies does too in the universities.
And I think to Judith's point, it sounds like her grandson was immersed in things Irish here in the States, and I know even for myself, there's a certain amount of romance attached to that. Going over there, I think grounds it in more of a reality, like you said. What are people really like? It's more of a diverse population. Dublin's a very urban place. It's not rural. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that it's an eye-opening and enriching experience that not going can't give you.
Well, and the thing is, we've all experienced this in different ways. So when I'll say John and myself, for example, when we went to Ireland as tourists, we weren't really going as tourists. We were going to visit family, and you were not going to, you were going off the beaten track. Whereas Americans had a set route that they took. They went where Holiday Magazine told them to go, and they saw what they expected. Whereas we saw the world our parents and grandparents came out of, which is entirely different. So those two things were also being balanced in the 20th century. It's less so now because the west of Ireland is very modern, you know, very modern. Yeah, you don't have to go to Dublin to have modernity. You can have it, you know, in Clare.
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks, Marion. You put me in mind. I think a big issue here is what's legitimacy. You know,
Yes.
What is and who gets to define that?
Yes.
You put me in mind of a brouhaha in the American Conference for Irish Studies in the 1970s, when someone decided that they needed a logo for the organization, and so they gave it the job to a graphic artist at some Midwestern school, I think, who immediately concocted this thing with shamrocks on it, and the membership went nuts. And then it got shifted to Book of Kells, doodads, and in some ways, I think that I mean, I'm not so sure that an American Irish organization should be so touchy about using shamrocks, because after all, that's, you know, if you're going to be talking about the American Irish, yeah, well, the shamrock is more it than the Book of Kells.
And the shamrock is a beautiful, beautiful botanical plant. Think of all the emblems of other countries. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank God we have the little green shamrock. I think it's a wonderful thing. But, you know, Ed, you're pointing out something. The Book of Kells imagery was in circulation in the United States in the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. They were selling souvenirs with the Book of Kells motifs on it. So those two things are also simultaneous. So yes, the idea of what's authentic. The Book of Kells is more authentic than the shamrock. Why?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Why? And in some ways it's because Ireland, since it got independence, has been positioning itself as the arbiter of what is Irish, whereas Irish America for a very long time has had a different definition. The two are not incompatible. They're just, I think we just need to realize that what Irish America thinks of, okay, I have to qualify this statement because I'm not going to endorse the red beard leprechaun stuff, but what Irish America saw as Irish in the most respectable way, to say the shamrock, is legitimate. It is a legitimate, and so in some ways is love for Danny Boy, the song Danny Boy, it's to the Londonderry air. So it's recorded and sung in loads of American homes here, and lots of Americans think it's Irish. It's not. The air is Irish, but the words are I think it's an English author, etc. But why is that considered illegitimate? Why does it have to be, you know, I can't think of a Clancy Brothers song now, but some of you can, you know, why isn't there room for all?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I guess I remember, you know, growing up in an Irish neighborhood, you know, there was sort of low intensity conflict between what we called lovingly, you know, the narrowbacks and the donkeys, and that was always going on, and an issue was this, you know, who's really Irish, right? You know, the implication was always there, and I think that still persists somewhat. The other interesting thing is, I noticed we've had this whole discussion, and the word Catholic has never come up.
Exactly. You're right. I never thought, you're right.
Yeah. So Linda asked me what's surprising. What did I learn that was surprising? What surprised me most was the degree to which the Catholic Church endorsed the the way St. Patrick's Day was taught in schools and the way motion pictures were marketed using St. Patrick's Day memorabilia. And I think some of it was to, is that because St. Patrick's Day was becoming very secular, right? So the Catholic Church was like, okay, they can have this kind of harmless, you know, leprechauns and shamrock stuff. We're going to focus on Columbus Day as being the Catholic holiday. We're going to focus on Bing Crosby as the cool Catholic priest in the movies, and we're not going to worry about St. Patrick's Day, right? That's my theory of it. But it's surprising the number of endorsements that the Catholic Church and Catholic alumni of colleges, the role they played in
Well, the Fighting Irish icon for Notre Dame.
yeah. Trademarked in 1951 for sale on all sorts of items. Yeah. I don't want to get in trouble. My nephew goes to St. Notre Dame.
Well, I'm a Notre Dame fan, but I've always wondered, all these other icons are being taken away because they're deemed offensive, but yet that leprechaun persists. And it doesn't offend me, but it's always.
I think they could lose it. I mean, they also just use the Irish.
Mhm.
The Irish and ND, or if you just see Irish on an athletic uniform, it's a collegiate athletic uniform, it's Notre Dame. It's now because they go and play football in Dublin, now it's also being merged with Guinness.
Oh, that.
So
Okay.
you have a lot of this transatlantic fertilization going on here. I don't know where it's going to go in the future.
In some ways, it always comes back to the money, doesn't it?
And the leprechaun is on that T-shirt that says Guinness. Yeah.
So, well, unless anybody else has any questions, Marion, thank you so much. I know it's been like a very busy couple of weeks for you with all you've got going on. So this has been wonderful. And,
Thank you, Linda, very much for the privilege. And also, it's so nice to see, I see Frank Vardy and Monica and Ann Garvey. It's just so wonderful. Jim Garrity.
Ann was there the other night too, yeah.
Yeah. Frank, lovely to see you, Pat. And you're on John Ridge's, it says it's calling you John Ridge, Linda.
Yeah, because it's a long story.
Okay. Well, Judy, good to see you too. Yeah. All right. I hope it made sense.
Yes, it was wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Have a
Okay.
good weekend, everybody.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you very much. It was excellent.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody. Good job.
Thank you. Bye, Monica.
Bye. Bye.